voice eventually will surface. It may surface through a message. It may surface through your spiritual family. It may surface through the voice of the Holy Spirit. But as we bring this series to a close, you have to know that no matter how hard you've worked, how tired you are, what the circumstances may look like, how you may have lost your vision, you just have to calm yourself and listen for the voice. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we talked about the difference between grief and depression. We spent 2 weeks talking about that. And we said grieving is God's tool to help us adapt to reality. Grieving is God's tool to help us adapt to reality. And we said the fact, we spent a lot of time discussing the differences. But I want to just bring up one last point on this topic, because grieving is such an important discipline. And I've labored over it the last 2 weeks. We have a teaching series on it. But you have to understand, and I have to understand, that we live in a fallen world. And grieving is the tool that God gave us to help us deal with loss. The world's response to loss is depression. The Bible's response to loss is to grieve. But it's important, because I was thinking about this. Not only do we have to understand the criticality of grieving, but we have to make sure that we're very sensitive, because the world will tell you the answer or the antidote to loss, which causes depression, is to get. So if you lose a boyfriend, you get another boyfriend. If you lose a job, you get another job. If you lose a spouse, you get another spouse. But that's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches us to grieve so that we can bring a healthy person into that new relationship, or so we could bring a healthy mindset or a healthy reference point. In fact, some of the worst relationships you'll see are bounce back relationships. Some of the worst marriages you'll see is when someone just marries someone on a rebound just because they want to prove, well, I'm not going to be single my whole life. If you can cheat on me, I'm just going to. And they make these terrible decisions. So I really want to get that in your mind, because there's a temptation that when you've lost something, and we've all lost something, and when you feel the symptoms of depression slipping in, there's a great temptation to say, okay, my answer is to get. But that may not be your answer. Your answer is to grieve. And grieving is a process, and it's a tool that God gives us to help us adapt to reality. It's a tool that God gives us to help us deal with the sadness of the loss. And it's a tool that we want to get skilled in. Now, as we bring this teaching series to a close about overcoming depression, I just want to give you a couple of reference verses, because, again, we talked about this in our first 2 weeks, but if you're not careful, depression is something. Now, I don't want to make an idol out of depression. I think you know that already. But depression is something, or feeling down is something that in certain camps you could feel condemned for experiencing. And listen to these verses in Psalm 69:20. In fact, turn there, Psalm 69:20. Psalm 69:20. Even when it doesn't use the term depression directly, it uses terms like, and you'll see this, heaviness. Have you ever felt just a heaviness? You just felt like there was something lingering over you? It says, Psalm 69:20 says, reproach has broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. And I look for someone to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. But notice what the psalmist is saying. He says, I'm full of heaviness. The Bible is not scared of talking about this. It may not call it depression outright, but it's very synonymous. In Psalm 119, verse 28, you can write the reference down. It says, my soul melts from heaviness. Strengthen me according to your word. And obviously Isaiah 61:3, which is a verse that we've looked at many times, it says, I'm going to read the first 3 chapters. Turn to Isaiah for a second. Isaiah 61. We want to get our arms around the fact that the Bible has much to say about this topic, whether it calls it depression, whether it calls it downcast, whether it calls it your soul being disquieted, whether it refers to being pressed. Isaiah 61 says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me." This is such a great reference verse for Jesus' ministry. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to console those who mourn in Zion." Here we go. "To give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning," and here we go, "the garment of praise for a spirit of heaviness." The garment of praise. Notice what counteracts heaviness. The garment of praise. Notice what the antidote is for heaviness. Because what's heaviness? Heaviness is focusing on what's not going right. Heaviness is focusing on loss. Heaviness is focusing on things that you wish were different. Notice he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," to help address that. Now, as we bring this to a close, I said, and I hope you've caught this, that I think the key among many is you have to catch yourself early in the cycle. Early in the mental cycle, early in the emotional cycle. You have to catch yourself before the snowball starts picking up momentum. Because if you leave your mind unguarded or your heart unguarded, you watch the speed at which your heaviness builds up momentum. And this is a constant battle. You have to purpose in your heart and settle in your mind that this is part of my survival kit. I can't be casual with this. My attitude can't be, well, you know what, I don't really feel like doing this today. There will be days like that, and when you have those days, you leverage your spiritual family. But there are times when you can't get to your spiritual family. And you have to purpose in your heart that this is something that you're going to be ruthless over. I have to guard these thoughts. In the same way that the security people at the airport, you see how ruthless they are when you're trying to get through? You have to scan your luggage. You have to take your shoes off. You take off your belt. You take off your watch. That's the same degree of protection you need to use as it relates to your thought life. I think it's called TSA. You need to have TSA with your thoughts. You just can't let thoughts just casually enter. Thoughts have power, and we can't constantly be conceiving thoughts and then think that we're going to just abort the fruit of those thoughts easily. So you want to make sure that you catch yourself. You may have to have a trigger. You may have to, I don't know what it is. You may need to put your watch on your right hand, and every time you look at it, say, are you guarding your thoughts today? Have you been watching your mind? You may want to put it on your screensaver. You may want to put it on a stickum, whatever it is. You want to make sure that you are being ruthless with guarding the thoughts of heaviness, because once they build up momentum, they're difficult to resist.